Welcome to Becoming Heisenberg. It's Entertainment Talks podcast for Breaking Bad on AMC and Netflix. I'm your host Matthew. Joining me today, my co-host is David. How are you?
Melting, but fine.
Yeah, it's been an eventful morning, but
Yes.
which won't matter by the time this comes out. But anyway,
No.
see, this is for season 1, episode 5, called Grey Matter. What did you think of this episode?
I like this episode as well. It's another slightly slower one after the first few, but it's still got some great stuff in there. I mean, yeah, we've said repeatedly, I don't think there is a bad episode of this show. And like I say, it slows down a little bit, but we are at the point where you need to kind of build some groundwork for the things that are going to come later on. As the season and the show grows. So this was good. We got a bit more of introduction to Gretchen, who we saw briefly last week. We saw Elliot for the first time. We saw Badger for the first time as well.
Yeah.
This is where Badger comes in. So, I'd kind of completely forgotten that's how they met obviously they knew each other, but that's how they kind of reconnected at this point. I am really enjoying going through this because you do completely forget how everything, it's like having a big jigsaw puzzle and you've forgotten what the picture is.
Right,
And you've got to kind of stick
certain
it back
parts
together.
of it, yeah, like the big
Yeah.
parts, but
You
yeah.
know what? You've got the box, and you know what the picture's supposed to be at the end. But
Right.
you've got It's I can't quite remember which bit goes where and what connects to what. So I'm quite enjoying going through all this stuff again.
Yeah, it's quite an experience.
The I've forgotten about the sofa scene as well with the
Pillow.
talking pillow, which is just hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think this is a very good episode. I do agree that, like, okay, you got the first 3 or 4 episodes or whatever, and Walt gets his first kill, and they deal with Crazy 8 and all this other stuff, but I do think as well that this episode kind of pins the end of this current kind of arc, because there's the question at the end of, like, okay, do you want to cook again? And then that's going to go back to being the way it is. But yeah, this is a good kind of middle section to that, where it's like we're introduced to 2 brand new characters. We sort of revisit one that was sort of introduced in a previous episode in a flashback and that, and they deal with that really well. You've got some big developments for, like, the main thing that's happening to one of the main characters, the whole cancer thing and stuff. So there's a lot still going on, but I mean, it's sort of like you've got 3 episodes of dealing with Crazy 8, and then a couple of episodes just kind of setting up the next piece, and then now you've got this, the last 2 episodes of the season, and you've got the question posed again of, like, okay, do you want to start cooking? They pretty much are going to. So it's a good little 3-part arc for the first season, because we've got two more episodes left after this, but I think they handled it pretty well early on. I mean, for a first season, you do have to, like, set up your world, set up your characters, what's the relationships that are happening, and kind of setting up, okay, what's going to kind of happen in the future, and then talk about, okay, the backstory stuff, which there is a lot that needs to be dealt with in that. I kind of realized with this first season how much backstory you kind of get into. You get into the Gretchen and Elliot stuff in this episode. There's, in the previous episodes, been, like the family history and Walt's kind of science history with Gretchen, and then you've got, like, the student history, teacher student sort of history stuff with Jesse and Walt. So the first season does deal with an awful lot of that, and you've got to kind of get that out the way, but in the best way possible, because if you sort of just blankly put that stuff on the screen, it's not very entertaining. So in a first season that does have all this stuff kind of going on, you've got to try and first of all tell that story in a good way, but also make it very entertaining, and I think Breaking Bad still does that very, very well. Does it better than most shows, I think, as well. So.
What's particularly interesting about this episode is it's really about pride, and it's about Walt's pride, and also about Jesse's pride as well, because there was a point in this episode where neither of them actually necessarily would need each other. If Walt had got over his pride and taken the money from Elliot, he would have just had all his cancer treatment paid for. He wouldn't have to be doing the drug stuff. If Jesse had been okay with the level of quality of the meth he was cooking, and not been trying to better or get to the standard that Walt was at.
Mm-hmm.
And, the stuff he was cooking was supposed to be great meth. It just wasn't the clear
Top
stuff,
quality,
the top quality stuff that Walt was cooking. But he could have sold it and could have sold it for quite a lot of money. It was still a good quality product, as Badger was pointing out. And he could have made money for himself just cooking that way with the extra bits of knowledge that Walt had taught him. But he's determined to get it as pure as he possibly can because his pride gets in the way.
Yeah.
So the whole episode is about the fact that these two don't actually need each other, but their pride is forcing them back into this dangerous situation.
And they're
which
also
is really interesting.
They're also better when they work. Well, not relationship wise, but the quality of the work is also just better when they work together.
Yeah,
because
that is true.
of the way they click together as a team.
And you've also got this sort of introduction of this juxtaposition of this relationship of Walt with Elliot, where the pair of them had worked together and Walt had walked away. And maybe there is something in that sort of informs this ongoing relationship with Jesse as well. So there's lots of really interesting little subtle things going on with this, which I rather like.
Yeah. I think one of the big themes of the show, at least in the first season, is alpha male kind of stuff. Because you've had a lot of scenes where like Hank has said to Walt about like, okay, I'll take care of your family, and him kind of trying to be the big guy and everything, and then Walt kind of saying in this episode about like, okay, I've not really had much choice in my life and I want to, and that's a very kind of alpha male thing to say. And then Jesse trying to sort of take lead over Badger and say like, no, we need to do better. So there's a lot of like male leadership stuff that's trying to go on, which is quite central to the show. I mean, you've got two characters who are trying to be the alpha male, Jesse and Walt. Arguably Walt is the leader of the two of them, but yeah, it's interesting to go through. But yeah, I thought the episode was great as well, and I think it leaves the season in a very interesting place for the last two episodes, which we'll get to in the future. Alright, let's get into the main part of the episode, I think.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Donnie, and I host the Adulting with Donnie podcast. And this is not the show to listen to if you're trying to be a better adult. I started this podcast as a way to offload some thoughts that I have throughout the week. My topics vary widely every week. Movies I've seen, guns and gun control, sex, people that are stupid, why I don't care about celebrity opinions, TV shows, snowmobiling. The list goes on and on. I'm always taking topic suggestions from fans of the show too. So join me each week on Adulting with Donnie as I pour some bourbon and allow you to see the inner workings of the mind of a madman. Live free and rant hard.
I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are Killer Fun. We explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week.
For as long as people have been communicating, they have been talking about who did what to whom, and is that socially acceptable?
Because the boundaries of society,
crime,
and entertainment have always gone hand in hand.
The more salacious,
or weird,
the better. From books and movies
to television shows and games,
we look at how life and art imitate and inform one another.
And we can't get together and not laugh. So let's face it, there's going to be laughing.
Killer Fun is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, so join us.
Today's sponsor is Kualu. If you'd like to get started with a domain name and a website today, just click on the link in the show notes and that will take you over to Kualu to get started. They also have a live support chat system that you can use, which is in the bottom right hand corner. So get started with a new website and domain name today with Kualu. Hey everybody, if you would like to get the ad-free versions of all of our podcasts and support Entertainment Talk along the way, all you need to do is head over to patreon.com/entertainment talk. Sign up either as a creator or as a Patreon, there's no difference there. That's just the option for either becoming a creator now or just staying as a patron for the moment. And then all you need to do is support us at the $1 level tier. That will get you access to all of the ad-free podcasts that we've done in the past, and get you access to all the ad-free podcasts in that month as well. So it's a great way to support us on Entertainment Talk and to get rid of the ads and get your ad-free podcasts. You can also become a patron at the $3 level tier. That gets you access to ad-free podcasts and allows you to redeem a review of a TV show or a film of entirely your choice. That's one per month for either a TV show or a film review, which is at the $3 level tier. As always, thank you very much for listening. Back to the show. After a failed interview, we are introduced to Badger. He kind of Jesse's shown by this guy in the office or whatever who's interviewing about like, okay, this isn't a sales job, this is like something else, and if you want the sales job, you're going to need 2 years of experience and that. And he kind of points to Badger outside, and he's got this sign sort of thing, like this mascot type of thing that
it's one of those that we don't really get them very much in the UK, but it's one of these mascot things that spin the side round and point them to whatever the shop is. But and he's dressed as a stack of bills, which is great.
You get them in football sometimes, like Man United have got Fred the Red, because we're called the Red. Man United
you get
the Red
those
Devils.
sort of mascots, but they're not like selling. They're not advertising mascots as such.
Yeah, because you don't really get like ones that are outside shops and stuff. You get ones that sort of go on the football pitch sometimes, and soccer for the Americans, and that sort of thing. But you don't often really see these very much in the UK, these types of jobs. And he kind of realizes immediately, like, okay, this is what this guy actually wants me here to do, and he sort of walks away from the job. And then we see Badger, who's seemingly quite into this job. Actually, he's sort of like really trying to get himself out there, and he's showing Jesse all these kind of like the helicopter trick and all that sort of stuff. So he seems to be doing it at least, which is great. And then they have the conversation about crystal meth and like Jesse's trust. It's fun. I think Jesse says something along the lines of like, oh, he wasn't like, I was doing all the work kind of thing, or something like that, trying to sort of put
he's
down,
trying,
which is
he's sort of trying to make out that he is the person,
he was the big one.
He was the one that was cooking this great meth. And I guess part of that is what we were saying beforehand. The fact that it's not up to the standard of the batch that Walt cooked. When they come to cooking it himself, he's not up to that same standard, and he's trying to claim that he was the person that cooked it in the first place. So I think that is part of it as well.
So and it's just funny when he mentions that, because I immediately was sort of like thinking, okay, what about the box? You messed up that situation, but he's not going to mention that to Badger, is he? So but I thought that was pretty good. What do you think of the introduction of Badger?
As I say beforehand, I'd forgotten that's how Badger kind of turns up and ends up being one of the kind of main friends of Jesse. I do wonder how. I can't remember how they end up reconnecting after this as well. I'm guessing it's to get more product that they need to cook the meth. I would probably think, but because obviously we know Badger is around for majority of the show. In fact, he's in El Camino as well, isn't he? So we know Badger is there pretty much throughout. I thought Badger's a nice kind of comedy character to a certain extent as well. So it's sort of nice to see him actually introduced in this way. And as I say, I'd completely forgotten this is how they met in the first place, or reconnected, because they obviously knew each other previously. It's funny just to see him sort of stood out there swinging that sign around.
I did actually forget that he left him in a desert with a crossbow.
Yes.
Because I was watching that scene and I was like, wait a minute, what does actually kind of happen here? And then we find out. But that's the cold open pretty much ends with the introduction of Badger, and they're talking about the crystal meth and stuff. Walt and Skylar attend a birthday party for their wealthy acquaintance, Elliot Schwartz. Years earlier, Walt and his then girlfriend Gretchen had formed a company called Grey Matter, the name of the episode, Technologies, with Elliot. Their company name derived from mixing the colours in their last names, White and Schwartz, German for black. But Walt opted to sell off his share, so he basically just left and then ended up at this school and met Jesse. Subsequently, the company had flourished off of Walt's innovations, and Elliot married Gretchen a bit later. Walt is tense at the birthday party due to his troubled past and everything that's kind of happened, and plus the fact that, you know, he's got cancer, so that's obviously a worry for him as well. When Elliot offers him a job and tells him grey matter has got excellent health insurance, which would help with the cancer, Walt realizes that Skylar told Elliot about his cancer, and then they get upset and then they leave. A few other little interesting points here as well. The ramen stuff, the food.
Yeah.
I thought that was, because again, I didn't quite remember how that sort of went. And then it looks like this sort of little, I don't know, joke type of thing, and then they talk about like, okay, this like meant a lot to us. Like, yes, it's some little silly like ramen food or whatever, but it was what they were living on for 10 months or something, and it's one of them smaller sort of big parts of their history, and then him kind of thanking Walt for that which was pretty nice. You can really tell in a lot of these scenes when Walt's getting attention for something, like at the family visit in the pilot with Hank, and he gets uncomfortable there, and then later on with some of the cancer talks, and then here with the birthday party with Gretchen and Elliot, and then he's thanking Elliot's thanking Walt for that, and he gets quite uncomfortable when the attention's sort of on him, and you've just got the feeling that like he's either not used to that or just it's just not kind of the way he is, I suppose. But he sort of awkwardly stands there and like accepts the thanks and all that. So good way to introduce Gretchen and Elliot and explain kind of the past and stuff. I found it quite funny because he's walking around the building, he has this little like coughing fit again, and he's walking around like part of the garden or something, and then meets the other three people, and they say, oh hey, well, we haven't seen you for a while and that. And then he starts trying to explain to these guys about like how the sciencey sort of stuff, and you can tell that they're listening, but they have like no idea kind of what he's talking about. I thought was great, because I mean we've all done that, right? We've all had conversations with family or friends where like they've asked you about like, oh hey, what have you been up to or something, and you know that they know nothing about the thing you're talking about, but because you're so enthusiastic about it, which Walt is with the science, you just keep chatting, and you just kind of stand there just like talking gibberish to them kind of thing, which I thought was quite a good scene as well. So yeah, I thought this was a good way to introduce the characters. What do you think?
Yeah, I enjoyed this bit of the episode quite a lot. There's the bit where I couldn't remember what happened when he wanders into the library. Because there's a bit where he wanders into that library and has a coughing fit, and I couldn't remember whether he because there was quite tense there, because you didn't know whether he was going to spill something on one of those really expensive books that he was obviously looking through. So that was quite nice, and and then just the uncomfortableness of being at that party where Walt obviously didn't particularly want to be there. He turned up. These people were technically his friends, but he hadn't seen them for a very long time. They've also massively overachieved compared to Walt, who is a high school chemistry teacher. And these guys have gone on to create this massive company, which Walt clearly had some involvement in, because they talk about the name Grey Matter and how it was a mixture of White and Schwartz, which is German for black, and that was why it was called Grey Matter. And but Walt had sold out of the company for whatever reason. That's never actually explained, I don't think, directly in the show, although I think Vince has actually gone on to explain that afterwards. But it just horribly uncomfortable, and they're sort of overdressed. Everybody's wearing beige, which is it's just really odd. The scene with the ramen was, because it is one of those things where I'm kind of glad that it went that way, because it is a case of what do you get a guy which clearly has everything, and could pretty much buy whatever he wants. You've either got to go for something really obscure, like the Eric Clapton guitar that one guy buys, and something that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get hold of without contacts. But if you're in Walt's position where you're broke anyway, or certainly not particularly well off, I thought it was a lovely, sweet gesture, and I like the fact that Elliot responded quite nicely to that. And again, this is where we see Walt's ego get in the way of him finding a way out. Because, yeah, okay, Skylar did tell Elliot about the fact that he was ill, and that then possibly prompted Elliot to offer him a job which maybe he wouldn't have done, otherwise. But then again, maybe he would. We don't actually know. But the fact that we don't know kind of leads Walt to go, well, I'm not taking this job just because you're doing it out of charity. So, and his ego gets in the way. Otherwise, that would have been a way for him to get out, but he won't do it.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting as well when you look at Elliot and you look at Hank. I know Hank isn't as rich as Elliot, but he's still like confident and comfortable and happy, and he has kind of an ego and whatever. And then you look at again the two different scenes with when Walt's talking to Hank and he's talking about like, oh yeah, we did this drug deal and all that sort of stuff, and not drug deal, drug bust and whatever. We got all this money, and kind of gloating about it. And then you go several episodes later to Elliot's house and stuff, and he's not quite gloating in exactly the same way. Obviously they're different characters and whatnot, but you can still see again someone who's done just or is more happier in their life and is doing better in their life than what Walt is. And that's probably also, I mean, again, the male ego stuff, or the alpha male sort of stuff, that's probably some of the something that's contributing here to just Walt's kind of attitude in these situations, because you know that he has got some confidence and stuff. Like there's some things he's able to go and do, and we'll see how that progresses over the series. But it's an interesting way to kind of again bring up like these other people in his life who have they've done better, they're happier, and they're more sort of satisfied with their life and that kind of stuff. So I found that kind of interesting as well, again with those characters. Gretchen and Elliot, cool to see them in the series as well. Jesse shows his friend Badger the RV Walt and Jesse used as a meth lab. In the desert, Jesse is frustrated with that the quality of his meth is inferior of that of Walt's, and throws his own product away just into this, not into a fire actually, it's just onto the floor. Much to Badger's dismay, he's really not happy with that at all, because they just spent seemingly quite a lot of time. You do get these little montages of time that's passed.
It's not so much just the time as well, it's the fact that Badger had provided the base product for it and had spent money buying the base product, and Jesse is just throwing away. And it was perfectly viable meth, it just wasn't up to Walt's standards.
Jesse cooks a few more batches, which he also discards. Badger and Jesse fight over the wasted meth, which is understandable from both sides. And Jesse pushes him out of the RV and drives away as Badger tries to shoot him with a crossbow. Which is cool.
Crossbow versus an RV is not going to do an awful lot. It's a lovely comedy scene.
Another AMC show with a crossbow in it. So
yes.
Daryl from Walking Dead. Interesting little stuff here again, just showing the complete difference between Walt and Jesse's lives, but how they do ultimately need each other. Rather, as I said before, it's not that they actually need each other. It's the fact that their egos have put them in the position in both their cases of the fact that they need each other. And they work better. And arguably, when they're cooking meth, they do work better together. But both of them could have gone on perfectly well if they were prepared to submit in some way. And neither of them are prepared to do that. Walt isn't prepared to submit to Elliot and, take his charity. Jesse is unprepared to submit to the fact that he's not as good a cook as Walt was. So... Yeah, it's interesting to see a bit of a change in roles here, because Jesse's more of the one that's in charge and the one that's saying, hey, this beaker does this and that and whatever, and Badger's the one kind of mucking about a bit. Whereas before it was, Walt saying, hey, we need to use this and that, and Jesse was the one messing about, and Jesse's the one who's basically in charge here. He's also obviously, the one that's saying like, hey, this isn't good enough, we need to do it again, and just throwing the stuff away. So... I wonder if they could, because you can understand from both sides why they're arguing, because Badger is, annoyed that, okay, we have cooked this crystal meth, yes, it's not as good as what he wanted, but it's still usable, and Jesse of the other side of like, okay, we just can't use this, and I'm going to
Well,
kind of throw it away, I suppose.
I think in this particular case as well, it's not that it's usable, because it's the fact that it's pretty darn good meth. It's a bit cloudy. It's not glass, but it's still a very good meth product. And Badger's looking at it going, well, this is great, and Jesse's but it's not the crystal clear stuff that Jesse's after. It's not as good as the original batch. So that's and that's I think you can entirely understandable why Badger's getting so upset about it. And again, Jesse and his ego is getting in the way of it, because he doesn't want Walt to be proved to be a better cook than he is.
Yeah, there's that as well, I suppose, as well. So, but I thought that was a good little scene with the two of them. And then, yes, he leaves him in the desert with just a crossbow. So, but he will be fine as well.
Yes.
I sort of wonder when, because there was a scene similar to this in an episode of House of Lies I watched recently, where someone gets left in the desert, but it's not too far away. I kind of wonder with this scene with Badger and Jesse how far they are away from like their houses and things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess they're a reasonable distance away from their houses, but it's whether they're away, whether there's any other form of civilization nearby, gas station or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but that's that scene. Over the weekend, Walt Jr. and two friends, or so-called friends, are waiting outside a convenience store, waiting for somebody to buy them beer. The friends run away when Walt Jr. approaches an off-duty cop. The cop tells him he got his first and last warning, what was it? Yeah, Skylar holds an intervention for Walt. We'll get onto that in a second. You've got Hank that comes and picks up Walt Jr. And he kind of says about like, oh, what do you think that your dad would think of this? You can't really trust him to come and pick you up and stuff, because he knows that his mum is gonna find out because he's being dropped off back home, I guess. But yeah, just doesn't want to call his dad to do this. And we've seen over the last few episodes and stuff, the big fracture in their relationship, and in the scene we're going to get into in a minute, just how Walt Jr. feels about his dad, I suppose. So at the moment he does, I guess, trust Hank more with the situation.
And I mean, and Hank does actually have a go at him for the fact that he doesn't call Walt to do this. How do you think your dad would feel? And I think Walt says something about, are we disappointed? And it's like, no, not about you trying to buy beer, about the fact that you didn't call him. You called me instead. It's more the fact that he called Hank to come and get him rather than calling Walt to come and get him as well. I think that's quite a major part of it. But yes, the nice little scene for this. Again, it's nice seeing more of Walt Jr. and more background to that character as well.
Yeah. So that was a good little kind of scene. It's more about, to me, this is much less about, okay, Walt Jr. and his mates wanting to buy drinks. This is more about like how he feels about his dad in the end, and how he basically gets on better with Hank, his uncle and stuff. Which is some interesting stuff as well. So, because it contributes to what's been going on. You've got the just the fracture of the relationship between Walt Jr. and Walt. Just a kind of a bit of an odd question maybe here. How do you feel about people that have got Junior in their names?
Well, it's not really their fault. I mean,
Right. It's the parents' decision, but
it's the parents' decision. Again, it's an interesting one because it does call back to ego as well. Because if I was to call if I had a kid and was to call them David Jr., I just wouldn't do it.
No.
It's a weird thing to do. I do find it very strange. And even if there's some long family tradition of it, I still find it a very odd thing to do, to name your kid after yourself, because that's such an ego thing.
Yeah. To me, it's a little bit. Partly, I feel like it's a little bit lazy, and partly I just feel like it's like your child is just not as superior as you because they're the junior version of you as well. So because there's a There's a footballer called Neymar who plays for Paris Saint-Germain, and he's actually called Neymar Junior. But whenever you hear like his name in the commentary or people talking about him, they always just say Neymar.
Yes.
So yeah, but anyway, that's that part of the episode. Skylar holds an intervention for Walt where she says she doesn't understand why Walt refuses treatment. Hank, Walt Jr. and Marie argue over what to do. While Skylar and Walt Jr. want him to take the treatment, Hank, Marie and later Hank feel Walt should be given the choice to decline the treatment because it's ultimately up to him. If he wants, Walt ends the intervention saying he will not do the treatment. So that's his decision at the moment. That does get changed, but yeah, what do you think of the talking pillow here, I suppose?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen various versions of this in various shows as well. The idea of you sit in a circle, it's like and you have like a conch or a stick, like a talking stick or something that you pass to each other, but they're using a pillow. Yeah, something you hold to make sure that people don't talk over each other.
Yeah.
Which
even though they still do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, of course, it's Skylar that set this up, and it's Skylar's the one who breaks it. Having a huge argument with Marie about it because Marie is really taking Walt's side on it, and I sort of get the point of that. There is an argument to say that if you have a terminal illness, do you want to spend your last what could be your last few months being poked by doctors and too weak to do anything, or do you want to take the treatment? And it is a genuinely tough decision for some people, depending on your age and what your mentality is, and Walt's justification for it I don't have a choice. It feels like it's something that he can control and something that he does have a choice about. And I kind of get that, it does make a certain amount of sense, as given that what we know about Walt. It's not necessarily the choice I would make, certainly not at that age. If I was in my, I don't know, 70s, 80s, and I got cancer, you might look at it and go, well, maybe depends if it's going to debilitate me to the point where I'm going to be stuck in a chair for the rest of my life, then no. But it's one of those things. I think at that age, in Walt's position, I would probably be doing it, particularly if I had a kid on the way. But
yeah, he's 50-something now, isn't he? Because he has his birthday in the first season, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he has another birthday later on, doesn't he? Because there is a scene.
Yep. So does
in the finals. Yes, there is. There's a significant birthday later on. I know that it's 55 or something, but because I remember there's a scene where he's sat in a diner on his own and he's making a number out of like chips or something.
I remember that. With bacon or something. Yeah, but that's in the later season.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's valid points from both sides. One is like, okay, if you do this treatment and it works and you beat this cancer and you can grow up and see your baby that's on the way and see your wife and son and your family and friends and whatever. But then there's also the other side from Walt, which is like, okay, if this doesn't work and I do die and my last weeks or months or however long he's got left is just him being sick and plugged into this drip sort of thing.
Interestingly, there's exactly the same argument going on 911 at the moment with one of the characters on there. Exactly the same argument of one of the characters refusing to do treatment because he doesn't want to be debilitated to that level.
But ultimately, it's got to be up to Walt. He's the one that's got to kind of go through it. Yes, it does affect the other people around him, but physically it affects him the most, and in the back of his mind as well, I think he knows that, okay, if I don't do this and I am able to stay healthy at least for a little while, he can do all this cooking stuff, and that's feeding back into the major part of the show, which he probably is thinking at that point, like, okay, because he does obviously plan later on to go and see Jesse and talk to him about cooking the meth, because that's exactly what he does. So there's probably part in the back of his mind that thinks like, okay, if I go through this chemo and I'm not actually strong enough to even cook this meth and even leave the money for my family when I die, that's something he can't then do as well. So it's an interesting scene. Again, like I said, going back to Walt Jr., him just saying like, I think you're a pussy and all this sort of stuff, and him sort of lifting up his crutches and being like, yeah, I've dealt with this and you don't want to go through with that. And because I think we talked about that a few episodes ago.
Yeah,
when
the
cancer reveal episode.
Yeah, there's the episode where Walt Jr. just snaps at him and says, well, why don't you die? If you're just going to give up, why don't you just die now? And as I remember saying at the time that I entirely get where Walt Jr. is coming from that, because this is a kid that's had to battle every single day to get through things and struggles with just the basic stuff through life, and he's fighting every single day, and his dad, as he sees it, will not fight for his own life. And so you can see why he's annoyed and upset with him.
Yeah, and at the moment that's resulted in him leaning on his uncle to basically be his father figure, which doesn't look good towards Walt, because that goes back to, okay, Hank's better. He feels like Hank is better than him, and his own son is leaning on Hank to do things for him. So very, very interesting stuff with that. I thought that was a very good scene. The next morning, Walt has a change of heart and tells Skyler he will do the treatment and he will take care of Elliot's check. Later, Gretchen calls him, telling him that he has to accept the money. Walt says he appreciates the offer but lies and says his insurance will now cover it. So he's had to basically lie his way through this whole thing about the whole money and insurance and stuff like that. Walt then goes to Jesse's house and asks him if he wants to cook. We can probably guess the answer, which is going to be yes, because that's what the major part of the series is about. Yes, but great way to end the episode. And like I said in all the way back in the pre-talk, you've kind of had the little arc with them starting this drug stuff and all the Crazy 8 stuff, and then a bit of backstory. You get Gretchen and Elliot in there, you get Badger and Skinny Pete in there, and some of these other new characters to sort of set them up for the future. And the Gretchen and Elliot thing is quite major, and all the backstory stuff that feeds into all of that. And then you've kind of finished with that for the moment, and now you're going to set up this next arc where, okay, they're going to continue cooking together, and then you've got 2 more episodes of the season. Very, very good structure, I think, for the first season, because for those of you that don't know, so you've got season 1 that's 7 episodes, and then seasons 2, 3, and 4 are 13 episodes, and then season 5, the final season, is 16. That was split into 2 parts of 8, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because like I said before, when I went to watch the series, it was all out. So, very good end to the episode. What do you think of Walt dealing with this money situation with Gretchen?
I'd say it said before, it comes back to Walt's ego again, because there is, if you're put in a position where he said that he'll take the treatment, the easiest thing to do at this point would be just to say thank you to Gretchen and take the money, because she's offering it with no strings attached. They clearly have it to be able to spend. There is no reason why he shouldn't, no real reason why he shouldn't accept the money from her, except that he feels inferior to these people, and he doesn't like that feeling. He feels, it's the same thing that has come out from the talk about him not being in control. It's exactly the same thing. He feels inferior. He feels that he's never had control over anything, and this is a way of him grasping at being able to control the situation in some way. But blatantly, the sensible thing to do here would be just to say thank you and take the money for the treatment, because it would have been offered completely for free, and they're offering to do it. Why wouldn't you? Except for his ego. He wants to be the person that provides. He wants to be the person that is able to pay for it. It's crazy, and that his ego is getting in the way. And the thing that will push, as we know, Jesse won't go on to cook more. And the thing that will push Jesse back to wanting to cook with Walt, even though the two really don't like each other at this stage, the thing that pushes them back together is their egos, because Jesse wants to cook the best meth possible, and Walt wants some control over his life, which he doesn't feel like he has right now.
Which he does have when he's in charge of Jesse, I
Yeah.
suppose. To a certain degree, but he's
Well, yeah.
he's the leader. He is kind of the leader of the two of them, and he's the one who knows more about what he's doing with the crystal meth. So, and again, just feeds back into Walt's biggest strength is his knowledge of the science and all that, and that feeds
Yeah.
into all of this that's going on with him and Jesse. So yeah, it's a great way to set all that up for the end for the end of the episode. But yeah, like you said, he doesn't like accepting help from people that he feels are, I guess, better than him. Gretchen, Elliot, and Hank, as well. Because the only time he really has accepted something from them is with the ride-along thing with Hank, because he does actually go along on that. And I know that doesn't really push him towards anything necessarily. It pushes him, I guess, back towards Jesse, and he kind of finds him. But that's different to him accepting this money for the
and
treatment and that.
And there is an in that particular case, there is an ulterior motive.
Right, yeah.
Walt takes the ride along because they've had that story about how much money you can make cooking meth. So he takes the ride along to see what the consequences of doing that are, and wants to get a look at the lab and see what the meth setup is like and what sort of things you do. And so there is an ulterior motive for him doing it at that point. And again, that's about him trying to take some control. So the whole thing is really somebody who is ultimately at this point quite a weak person, just grasping at anything to be able to have some control over the direction his life is going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
to go back to one of the series' major questions, which is when did Walt break bad? And we kind of had discussed a little bit before about, okay, he's killed Crazy 8. That's one of the significant moments, but he definitely hasn't broken bad yet. I mean, you can still see how nervous he is around people, his lack of confidence and that sort of thing. So that probably hasn't happened yet as well, because he's still very much the Walter White that we know. He's just had some experiences, I suppose. So, would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we said last week, the killing of Crazy 8 was something which was very much forced upon him. It wasn't something that he wanted to do. It wasn't something he did out of a calculated move. It was something where, he would have let Crazy 8 go had he not realised the bit of the plate was missing. So it almost wasn't directly in his hands, because if he'd let Crazy 8 go, he would have, Crazy 8 would have just murdered him. So it was a him or me situation. There wasn't really anything that they could do about it. You had the thing with Ken and the squeegee on the car last week, which is again it's one of those first moments where he actively does something mean to somebody else.
Yeah.
And we've seen these little tiny snippets of it. You've had that there. You had him snap at Skylar when they were having the scan. Those are the only two bits where you've seen these little cracks started to form in Walter, again, trying to take some control over the situation or doing something that he thinks is justified, regardless of whether it is or not, Yeah. So you get these little moments of it, but there hasn't been a kind of particularly big, him really properly Breaking Bad at this point.
Yeah. So, and that's the end of the episode. They will be back cooking together next week. I don't really think that's a spoiler, because it's quite obvious, isn't it? Because otherwise, if Jesse turns around and says no in that scene, then what do you do after that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't get Breaking Bad. So, but that's the end of the episode. We'll be back next week for the penultimate episode already for the first season. It's kind of flown by, this, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
Yeah,
it's been fun.
So, we'll be back for that next week, and so we'll the audience, I suppose. But you can find in the meantime, if you've got any thoughts, feelings, questions, comments, or maybe you have concerns about Breaking Bad or anything related to Entertainment Talk, don't feel free to email into us, and send in that feedback. Matthew at entertainmenttalk.org, Twitter eTalkUK. There's a contact page and information in your show notes. We'll still plan possibly to do some sort of we'll wait till the episodes start coming out first, which will be the week after we finish recording, actually. So we'll wait for them to start coming out, and then we'll do something from there. So possibly like a feedback episode after all the episodes have come out for this, but we'll plan that a little bit later down the line. The podcasts haven't even started coming out yet, so we shall wait for that to all happen. But please feel free to write in about the show or about Entertainment Talk as well. Speaking of Entertainment Talk, you can find everything that we've got on entertainmenttalk.org. If you'd like to support the podcast and support Entertainment Talk, we're on Patreon. You can have a look at the $1 and $3 level tiers for review, ad-free podcast, and instant podcast options as well. Amazon affiliate link: if you're buying stuff on Amazon, we can get a small cut of what you spend, but it won't cost you extra. iTunes feeds, you can rate, review, subscribe to those. David's also on iTunes. If you search for Geektown, you can get your up-to-date and reliable TV and film news. Geektown Radio is on Tuesdays, so you can look out for that. That'll either be, or it will be on both, geektown.co.uk and Geektown Radio on iTunes. So have a look out for all that cool stuff. You can find Bex on Trista Bytes on Twitch. That's Trista, B-Y-T-E-S, excuse me. Trista, B-Y-T-E-S. If you search for that on Twitch, you should be able to follow her, subscribe to her, get involved with all of that. Barry is doing horror podcasts over on Talk and Stalk. That's on YouTube only, so search for that on YouTube. That is Talk and Stalk for your horror podcasts, rankings, and other different sort of stuff that he does over there for that. I think that's everybody's stuff. You can, of course, tell people that you know about the website, the iTunes feeds, all that sort of stuff, and everybody else's work, word of mouth and all that. Social media, Facebook and Twitter, and if you can, in different Facebook groups. Twitch, I'm streaming on there sometimes as well. You can follow that on there. That's everything. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you for the penultimate episode next week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.